All right, thank you, Rebecca. And good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us to learn more about self-regulation, how it's going to impact your practice, and why it's important. My name is Jennifer Kressbuch, and as Rebecca had mentioned, I'm the president of the NSSDMS, and I'm joined today by Julie Avery, the executive director of the NSAMRT. Before we delve too deep, I'd just like to kind of give a brief overview of what to expect during this presentation. We're hoping to get as much audience interaction as possible, so let us know if you have any questions. You can feel free to write down your questions as well, and then ask them at the end if you'd like, if your questions weren't answered throughout the presentation. Also, we'll be using a software that will allow us to interact with you guys using your phones. So please have your cell phones ready. We'll be doing that pretty shortly. And you can either text or poll your answer. So the Wi-Fi here is open, so you'll just have to join that if you don't want to just text the answer. A little later, we'll also be playing a short game of snakes and reguladders. You'll see that the instructions are on the tables there. It's pretty simple. It's pretty much what you would have played as a kid, but I'll go over that when we get close to it as well. And we'll be using the software for that as well, so keep your phones handy. You'll notice that our slides are pretty wordy, and that's just because we'll be posting the presentation for all those people who missed the talk or who would like to refresh on what we discussed today. Okay, so like I said, the next few slides we'll be using that polling software. So I'll give everybody kind of a moment to get it set up there. Oh, sorry, there's the information on it, that's important. So you can either, like I said, use the Wi-Fi and go to this website. Which one is this one, the laser? So you can either use this website here with that code, or you can text Julie Avery. It's not PAP sensitive, but it is all one word, 181, to the phone number 37607. And in terms of phone charges, I don't think that there's any, so if you have unlimited texting, you're fine anyway. Yeah. Can I get some thumbs up if we're good? Yeah? Looking good? Okay, perfect. So let's see if it worked. So just let us know what your primary area of practice is. If you are dual licensed, just choose the area in which you work the most. So I'll give you guys a couple seconds for that as well. All right, just a few more seconds there. Awesome. All right. So the next question, same thing. You're either going to text it or you're going to use the website. Is how many years have you been an MRT or sonographer? Again, keeping in mind if you're dual licensed, just total number of years practiced. Oh, quite a young crowd. You can see that when you look into the crowd too, though. Everybody's looking. Good. All right. So thumbs up. Everyone's good. Perfect. Okay. So thanks for taking part in the polling questions. Again, it's pretty easy, and we'll be using it throughout the presentation. So don't put your cell phones away. It's okay in this case to have them out. So we'll get started with our presentation now. I'm sure all of you guys consider yourselves professionals. So what happens when someone in your profession does something that's not illegal, but it's not safe for the public? The college will intervene. There's many examples of this in the news especially. So I just did a simple search of global news using the key terms College of Physicians and College of Registered Nurses, just because, again, this is a pretty big group, so I figured that would yield some pretty good results for us. And the following headlines were just some of the ones that came up. College of Physicians shuts down alleged unlicensed doctor. Winnipeg doctor suspended after multiple botched circumcisions. Regulator warns a woman who's posing as a registered nurse. Doctor with controversial history has license denied for third time. And some of these articles, they might even be ones that you remember hearing about. but they all share a common thread, which is that the college stepped up to protect the public. And this is important because medical errors, they happen daily, and some of these are just caused by a lack of knowledge and training as well, but they can be caused by operating outside your scope of practice, as well as failure to exercise discretion and respect, just to name a few things. The Canadian Institute of Health Information just recently published their report on hospital harm, and they found that patients suffered harm in more than 138,000 different hospitalizations in Canada between 2014 and 2015. And that 1 in 5 of these hospitalizations involved more than one occurrence of harm. So that's quite a lot. And that's just for inpatients, that's not outpatients either. It's estimated that on any given day, more than 1,600 hospital beds across the country are occupied by a patient who suffered harm that extended his or her hospital stay as well. And you may think these numbers, they only reflect the errors that are caused by physicians or nurses, but our professions, they play a very important role in healthcare in Nova Scotia, and errors made by MRTs and sonographers can be just as serious as well. It's our professional responsibility to ensure we have the knowledge, skills, and judgment to accurately provide care to our patients. And the college will be there to step in to set a standard we can hold ourselves accountable to. So self-regulation, it may seem like this complicated and confusing thing, but it's really a privilege to be self-regulated. It shows that our government sees us as mature professionals and that our professions have many unique aspects that we ourselves best understand. We have specialized knowledge specific to being able to self-govern as well. The government holds the profession accountable to protect the public because we personally best know what risks we can pose to the public. And this means that on an individual level, our college, the Nova Scotia College of Medical Imaging and Radiation Therapy Professionals, it's a mouthful, it will be the one to set the standards of minimum practice guidelines and determine what is necessary to protect the public, such as having well-educated and trained MRTs and sonographers, having continuing professional development criteria, etc. You'll also hear me using the term MIRTP quite often throughout the presentation, and Julie will use it as well. And what I'll be referring to is the acronym from the college, meaning Medical Imaging and Radiation Therapy Professionals, and it's essentially just referring to all registrants of the college. So, a self-regulating organization is the licensing body responsible for setting educational, technical, and ethical standards. Generally speaking, the power of self-government has two aspects, the power to license and the power to discipline. The self-regulating organization sets and maintains standards of competency and conduct. It supervises registrants and enforces those standards by disciplining members who fail to adhere to them. And the majority of the time, the college is not spent disciplining registrants, but rather setting standards that are high enough to keep those from practicing that are unqualified to work in the first place, or even warning of those individuals who may be posing a threat to the public. And this was the case in some of the news articles, again, that I had mentioned earlier, such as the one where the regulator announced to the public via the news article that a woman was posing as an RN in order to obtain caregiver roles. So this wasn't just in the hospital. She could be going to people's homes and saying that she is an RN. So you can see why that would be an issue. And the college fulfills these roles in order to meet both of its mandates. Our primary mandate being to protect the public, so you'll hear that quite often throughout the presentation, and the secondary mandate to preserve the integrity of the profession. So this slide has information that's directly taken from the Act, which will govern the MIRTPs, and explains the different things that the college will do to fulfill the mandate, such as establishing a code of ethics and standards of practice, which we already did, I think it was last year we made those, yeah. So once a person has been admitted to a profession, the self-governing body has an ongoing obligation to the public to ensure that its members remain competent. They must continue to meet professional and ethical standards. And the professional regulator's duty to protect the public interest sets it apart from other organizations such as professional associations. Professional associations are voluntary membership-driven organizations, and they're dedicated to furthering the employment, professional, and political interests of their members and advocating on their behalf. So as a general rule, they don't tend to discipline or license their members. Through many of these next few slides, you'll notice that MRTs and DMSs, so I'm just saying diagnostic medical sonographers in short, practices, they vary quite a lot. And this is only because MRTs are currently regulated. Sonographers have no legal requirements to work in Nova Scotia. While employers have decided to make membership with Sonography Canada a condition of hire, it's not a legal requirement, so they can choose to change that on whim. MRI technologists also currently have no legal requirements. However, again, employers have made being an NSAMRT registrant a condition of hire. All other MRTs are legally required to be registrants of NSAMRT and members of CAMRT. And the purpose of the college will be, again, to set the minimum standards for the profession. The employers can always go above and beyond what our minimum standards are, but they can never hire below our standards, which, again, set for the protection of the public. So what are your thoughts on what could happen, again, getting your cell phones ready and stuff in here, what could happen after the college is proclaimed with your newfound knowledge of current registration requirements? So, which will be true after proclamation? Can you guys read that, or do you need me? Okay. All right, so I'm going to be reading some very wordy slides. MIRTPs will be required to register with the college and their national association. For nuclear medicine, X-ray, and therapy, there will be no changes, only for MRI techs and sonographers. And C, MIRTPs will only be required to register with the college. And put whatever you think. Don't go by what everybody's saying. Like, if you think it's one of the answers up there, go for it. All right. I think mostly everybody has answered. The numbers are still kind of going up and down a little. Perfect. All right. Okay. So, some of you may have answered that the only changes will be for sonographers and MRI techs. And while there are bigger changes for these two professions, a big change that MRTs will expect is that they no longer have to be members with CMRT. It's no longer going to be mandatory. It will be expected as well that employers will remove the requirement of DMSs to be Sonography Canada members as well, as this won't be a requirement of the college.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm one of the older ones, and you have a lot to say. So I just heard this. What are you saying about CMRT?
So that the current registrants for NSAMRT are required to be members with CAMRT, sorry, a lot of acronyms, but that will not be the case once the college is proclaimed. You will only have to be a member with, or a registrant of the college. It won't be a legal requirement.
So we would have our liability with the provincial?
No, and that's a good question. We're going to be coming up to that. The question was about professional or personal liability insurance, but we'll be coming to that in a few slides. All right, perfect. But yeah, so again, CAMRT and Sonography Canada memberships will not be legally required once the college is proclaimed. Okay. Again, the employer can go above and beyond and decide that they might still want you to have those, but for us, legally, you don't need that. All right, another big difference is that MRTs have been paying regulatory dues annually for many years. This is something that sonographers in Nova Scotia do not have to do, as there's currently no provincial regulator. So we have provincial associations that are voluntary, and we have Sonography Canada, but I'll be coming back to that in a little bit. So all MIRTPs will be expected to pay mandatory regulatory dues, including sonographers and MRTs. If we become proclaimed in 2020, these dues will be $450 per year, and there's no plan for that to decrease either. So there are other dues besides just regulatory dues which do exist. Currently, all MRTs, again in Nova Scotia, are required to be a CAMRT member, and they pay another $225 a year for this membership. Because employers in Nova Scotia require sonographers to be Sonography Canada members, they pay an annual fee of $281.25. So what other dues can you expect after the college is proclaimed? So this is going to be another one where you get your phones out there. Which other organizations will the registrants be required to join? So just thinking about the last few slides, what we talked about there. CAMRT for MRTs and Sonography Canada for sonography, ARDMS for sonographers, or none are required. All right. So oh, okay. So the correct answer is that none are required. So awesome that a lot of you guys got that. Again, just to reiterate, CMRT and Snarpy Canada not legally required. Again, employer may require it, but not for the purposes of legality. All right, so as mentioned in the last few slides, MRTs will no longer be required to be CMRT members after proclamation, and DMSs will not be required to be Sonarva Canada members. Therefore, the only dues that are mandatory will be those for the college, which are $450. Payroll deduction will still happen and be an option for the college dues, but not CMRT or Sonarva Canada, as these two organizations are optional after proclamation. So if you choose to still be a member with them, you'll just have to send them your dues directly. And in the day-to-day of being a working professional, there's always other costs as well. Currently, total costs for MRTs are $675, which include, again, membership with CMRT and NSMRT. Total mandatory cost for DMSs in Nova Scotia is $281.25 in order to work in Nova Scotia. And having said that, still a lot of other costs that can exist, whether you're a member of ARDMS or OAMRS or whichever else. Again, these are not mandatory costs to work, so they have not been factored into the slide. So any predictions as to what other costs may be mandatory for the college if membership with National Association is not mandatory after proclamation? So what other costs do you think might be there? CAMRT fees, personal liability insurance, provincial association dues, or Sonarva Canada fees? Ah, that coffee's kicking in. You guys are good. So, personal liability insurance, otherwise known as PLI. This is a mandatory cost for all MIRTPs after the college is proclaimed. And the next few slides will go more into the specifics about PLI. Currently, MRTs and sonographers are not legally required to have PLI. However, oftentimes you have PLI through membership with your national association, such as CMRT and Sonarva Canada, and you'll be able to get PLI with any provider of your choice after proclamation occurs. So this right here, this is a freestanding question. You can type in whatever you'd like to answer as the question, but what options do you think you'll have to purchase PLI? So what organizations might provide it, or how might you get PLI? Perfect, yeah. All great answers. Very fast moving, but they all look right. A lot of CMRTs in RP Canada. Perfect. And yeah, some private ones, good. All right, I'm really, yeah, okay. All right, I'm getting dizzy. Insurance companies, awesome, okay. Yeah, so there's numerous different PLI providers, and of course the two most common are CMRT and Sonarva Canada. And there's also the external insurance companies and associations such as OAMRS. And it's very important though that you double check with the college before purchasing any third-party PLI to make sure you have sufficient coverage, as the college will have a minimum policy for coverage for PLI. And the providers on the slide, they meet the requirements for the college policy. So your membership with those national associations, that's awesome. And again, if you're having a hard time reading this, it will be posted later for you to get the specifics of it as well. So purchasing PLI through your national association is typically cheaper as well than other third-party providers, and this is just one of the benefits to remaining with your national associations. I know I keep saying it's not mandatory to be, but it's still really beneficial to remain with them. So mandatory associations, they provide extra education, advocacy for your profession. Again, remembering the college will be primarily there to protect the public, so advocating for your profession is really awesome if you want to get that through your membership with national associations as well. National networking and professional development opportunities. Furthermore, if you're dual licensed as an MRT and a DMS, CMRT and Sonarva Canada will have sufficient coverage in both areas of your practice, so you will not need to purchase two different packages, which is also a big bonus. Another bonus to purchasing your PLI through your national association is that their coverage will always cover you in the time period that you had it. So meaning if you retired and gave up your membership and your PLI, and then you were sued, your PLI through the associations will still cover you because you had PLI at that time. right? A further example of discrepancy in current practice is that MRTs as regulated professionals have significantly more licensing criteria than sonographers at this time, again, legally speaking. MRTs are legally required to be a graduate of an approved education program, have successfully completed their national entry to practice exams. They're required to meet good character requirements as well as language requirements. Of course, they must legally also be entitled to work in Canada. For sonographers, however, the minimum standards, again, set by the employer. We're lucky that in Nova Scotia, the employers have set standards such as having your Sonography Canada credentials. However, again, not legally required and can be changed at any time. Having heard these differences, do you have any predictions as to what the licensing criteria for MIRTPs may be after the college comes into effect? So, a detailed work history will be required, is what A says. B, criminal records check and vulnerable sector check will now be required. C, passing the national exam will no longer be required prior to gaining full license. Or D, there will be no change. All right, so kind of split. Oh, I think I went too far. Sorry. Is that? Okay, here we go. Yes, exactly. The criminal records check and vulnerable sector check will now be required. So licensing after, the biggest changes is going to be, again, for sonographers. Licensing criteria for MRTs will remain the same, except for upon initial registration and reinstatement with the college, there will be a requirement of having a vulnerable sectors check and criminal records check. All licensing criteria expected of MRTs will be what's expected of sonographers as well after the college is formed. All right? And because there's been such a big discrepancy between sonographers and MRTs for so long, there's going to be a transitioning period for sonographers once the college is proclaimed. The college will only recognize Sonography Canada credentials after the transitioning period is over. And this means that sonographers who do not have Sonography Canada credentials will be required to obtain the appropriate training and credentials if they do not register during this transitioning period. The transitioning period is expected to be about 6 months, and during that period, the college will accept the following currently practicing sonographers. So first, sonographers who have Sonography Canada credentials and graduated from an accredited school, sonographers who have ARDMS credentials and have worked as a sonographer in Nova Scotia in the past 12 months, sonographers who do not have any sonography credentials but have been working in ultrasound in Nova Scotia in each of the past 5 years. And the transitioning period has several exceptions for sonography practice at the IWK, affecting nurses working in the Fetal Assessment and Treatment Center, as well as in the Children's Heart Center at the time that the Act becomes enforced. And for the specifics around that, just message us, and we'll give you more details on that if you'd like. But they won't be regulated by us. The nurses will still be regulated by their nursing college. MRTs will continue to require the same credentials to be licensed, so MRT criteria will not change, and therefore there's no transitioning period for the MRTs. And I'm going to pass the mic over to Julie now, who's going to be talking about disclosures.
Thank you, Jennifer. And we're going to move on to disclosures, something that most of us should be pretty familiar with right now because it is renewal season, so you've just been online recently and actually filled these out. MRTs do disclosures on initial application and renewals each year. Sonographers, as there is no regulatory authority at this time, do not do any disclosures. After a proclamation, we don't expect the disclosures to change. There will be one added additional acknowledgement around CPD, but none of the two disclosures will change. When we talk about disclosures, these are a few that are on our site. There are more than this. What I really want to focus on is the fact that saying yes to a disclosure doesn't mean you wouldn't gain licensure. So if someone answers yes to any of this disclosure, all that is a signal for the registrar to ask a few questions and to ensure that that disclosure doesn't actually impact the safety of that individual to practice. For example, one of these disclosures is about, is there any have you had disciplinary action against you at work in the last year? Typically every year we have a few people say yes to that. But typically the disciplinary action is around an HR management issue and not a regulatory issue, such as I got suspended because I was habitually late. well, that's an HR issue. It's not something the college is going to not license someone over. In the more serious things, then we would have to ask more specific questions. Things like if someone had a DUI charge, if that DUI charge was from 10 years ago and there's nothing else that indicates there's a substance abuse issue, again, it will not affect licensure. But if it happened a month ago, then we might be a little bit more concerned and ask some more questions to ensure that that person doesn't have an issue with substance abuse and therefore would pose a risk to the public if they were coming in intoxicated. So just to remember, the big thing there is to be honest in the disclosures, and if you do say yes to something, don't think that you're automatically not going to get licensure. The big thing to remember about the information you do provide to the regulator is that it's accurate and that it's current. If you ever fill in something that's inaccurate, that's later found to be an intentional misleading item, if you intentionally were inaccurate, that can lead to repercussions. The currency is also your responsibility. That means if you have an email change, a phone number change, your address, if you have a name change, any of those type of things, an employer, it's up to you to go onto that registration platform and update that information. If you have a change in your credential, once you're registered with us, you can't go in and change anything about your credentialing, but you need to reach out to us and have that updated as well. Moving on to continuing professional development, this is sort of a switch because usually it's the regulated professions that have the CPD, not the non-regulated profession. But in this case, because of our act, the age of our act, MRTs currently have no legal requirement to do CPD. However, sonographers, while they don't, because the employers mandate that they belong to Sonography Canada does have CPD, so the sonographers in the room are already doing CPD and retracking it. So your next question will be, what continuing professional requirement will be required after proclamation of MIRTPs? Oh, sorry, just you have to put this up there. This will help. Okay. Yes, so 30 credits every 2 years, 30 hours every 2 years. It will depend on where you work, or there will be no change to current requirements. So, looks like everyone has it, and answer one, it's 30 credits every 2 years. While most credits equate to an hour, it's not a direct correlation, so you can't say it's 30 hours. It doesn't depend on where you work. You may have other bodies that you're registered with that require CPD as well, but every MIRTP will require the same amount of CPD. It is prorated though, so if you are only a member for 1 year of the 2-year reporting cycle, instead of 30 credit hours, you would require 15. To look at the CPD program for the college, it's on the website, the detailed programs there that you can access. It's important to remember that CPD, while the college and employers will likely continue to provide opportunities to participate in CPD, the onus and the responsibility of accessing opportunities is that of the MIRTP. It is not the responsibility of either the college or the employer to provide you with those opportunities. However, moving forward, we still plan to do things like funding for lunch and learns, fall education, spring conferences, education, volunteer opportunities. We do Leadership Development Institute funding. We will live stream some educational events, and we'll make webinars for some. So there will continue to be many free opportunities that the college supports. And again, moving on to cost of CPD, there are enough things that qualify for CPD that if an MIRTP does not wish to spend any money on attaining their CPD, there is no necessity for them to do so. However, if you do want to take part in something that costs money, that is the responsibility of the individual MIRTP to cover. It's not the responsibility of the college or the employer to cover costs for continuing professional development. To say that there would be none would be wrong. There is some. We all know that the funding that is out there is limited though. And there is definitely a understanding by some that other colleges pay for their registrant CPD, and that's not the case. While other regulated health professional groups do get funding from other sources, it's not through their college. None of the regulated colleges actually pay for CPD of all their members. The tracking of CPD, obviously, because there is no requirement for MRTs currently, there is no need to track anything. However, for the sonographers who are doing it through Sonography Canada, they have the option of doing it in paper form or as an online version. Our next question for you is, which of the following statements will be true concerning CP tracking for the college? A minimum of 20% of the registrants will be audited every 2 years. All tracking must be done and entered into the platform on an ongoing basis as activity is completed. Individuals doing CPD with more than one body only need to track with the college, and it is the responsibility of the registrant to record and upload all the required information. So it looks like we have a fairly solid D answer there, and that is correct. We will be doing audits every 2 years, but it's a minimum of 10% of the membership that will be audited. While I would suggest that you do B, there's no requirement that you do B. You can sit there the night before your CPD is due and upload everything the night before if that's what you want to do. But it would seem an easier task to sort of do it on an ongoing basis as you do things. Individuals that are doing CPD for more than one body, for example, dosimetrists, you will have to do your tracking for both bodies separately at this point in time. You can use the activities for both bodies, so if you do something here, you can count it for them and us as long as it meets the requirements for the body, okay? So you don't have to do twice the amount of CPD. And we just covered that. Currency hours. The currency hours at this time for MRTs is that you have worked sometime in the last 5 years. So if you've done 1 hour in the last 5 years, that's all that's required. And of course, for sonographers, there is no currency requirements at all. So our next question for you is, what statement is accurate related to currency hours for the college? All paid hours can be used towards currency. Currency hour requirements are only measured over a 5-year period. If unable to meet currency hours, you can apply for an alternate method of assessment. You can separate currency hours. Separate currency hours are not required for each discipline an individual is licensed in. This is a little bit more mixed bag for response. Harder one. And you want to put them on? Yeah, show now. And our correct answer is that if you're unable to meet the currency policy, we are putting a caveat in that will allow for alternate methods of assessment. The all paid hours cannot be used towards currency. You get paid for vacation time. You get paid for sick time. Those are hours that you cannot use towards currency. We actually have, and I'll go through the policy, we actually have a 1-year and a 5-year option for calculating currency, and each discipline does require some hours. So this is our draft. It's been through about 40, 50 people, and we expect it to be approved at the next board meeting. What this means is that you will need 400 practice hours in each of your disciplines plus an additional 400. So if you're only licensed in one discipline, you need 800 hours in that discipline. If you're licensed in 2 disciplines, you need 400 in each discipline, plus an additional 400 that can be spread across those disciplines however you choose, which will give a little bit more flexibility to the dual licensed practitioners and how they get their required number of hours. And we do the same, this equates to basically working 0.1 of a job, okay? We also have a 1-year option, and the 1-year option is to address the fact that some individuals may have been out of the workforce for parental, maternity leaves, sick leaves, and what this will equate to is a 0.2 position in the last year. So basically someone who's come back to work, but maybe they can't get that 800 hours in just that 1 year, we allow you to get 360 hours in just that one last year. However, remember that it's a rollover every year. So the next year, if you only have that 360 hours, you need to get another 360 hours the next year, or to always, every year when you look at your currency, it has to be that within the last 5 years you had the 800, or in the last year you've had the 360. Now, this doesn't cover people who are new graduates and things like that. So they come under this clause, the second clause. So if you are an internationally educated coming into practice, if you are a new graduate, or if you're a refresher. Yes, Megan?
Do you just want to explain about the generic 400 and 180 and the plus plus?
So 400.
Like the generic 400 and each additional.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So if you're dual discipline, it's 400 in each discipline. So any discipline, you have to have the generic 400 hours. The additional 400 can be used any way across the disciplines in any way, but essentially what that will work out to be is if you have one discipline, you're going to get 800 hours. If you have two disciplines, your total hours will be 1,200 hours. If you have three disciplines, say, technically you would have 1,600 hours, right?
I guess what I'm trying to make
Okay.
is that rationale for the 400 generic or 180 generic hours is that there's a substantial
yes.
overlap between
Yes.
professions.
Yes.
And that while your current seat for multiple disciplines, there's still a significant amount of overlap between
Yes.
courses. So that's where the number for the generic number
Yes.
comes.
Yeah, that's right. So that 400 that we're allowed to spread it's the idea that you're actually overlapping in skill sets at that point. And practice hours, we mirrored these. We did an environmental scan across all MRT regulators and across health regulators in Nova Scotia, and we also consulted with legal. So that's what informed the policy. And when we talk about practice hours, it's really important you understand the definition of practice hours. It's far broader than clinical hours. It's anything, if you go to the Act and the regulations, it defines what practice is. So as long as those hours fall under that definition, it counts. So that includes things like education, research, application specialists. So jobs that are outside management, outside the clinical realm, as long as they're related to the MRT, that you're still practicing as an MRT, they would count. Moving on to licensing of new graduates. Our current legislation does not allow for licensing of new graduates or locums. If you graduate, you need to write that national exam and pass it prior to being licensed to practice. The exception is MRI, of course, because technically MRI is not mentioned in our Act, because our Act pre-exists MRI techs. The sonographers, of course, because they're not regulated, the same is true there. So employers have the option of their own discretion if they hire unlicensed MRTs and sonographers. Moving forward, though, this is your next question. Do you want to move forward? So what will be the situation for new graduates under the new Act? A temporary conditional license can be granted for up to 2 years. A temporary conditional license can be granted to the next sitting of the national exam. They will need to pass the national exam prior to beginning to work, or they can be granted a full practice license prior to writing the national exam. So we can show the right answer, I guess. There. So the right answer is that a temporary conditional license can be granted to the next sitting of the exam. So when they graduate, they can be given a conditional license to practice. It's good until the results of the next sitting come out of the exam. If they do not, if they're successful, that license is switched over to a full practice license. If they're not successful, the license expires and they cannot practice until they are successful at writing that national exam. Was there a question back there, Bob? No? Okay. Okay, and we just talked about that. We're also extending the idea of a locum, where we will address the needs for a short-term license. So say they, in some rural area, they needed someone to do sonography for 2 or 3 months. So licensing someone for a very short period, and the particulars of that are still being worked out, but we are looking at that as well. This is an important area. Is when we're talking about this, we're talking about scope of practice, and it's something that all MIRTPs really need to understand and have a thorough understanding of what it means to their practice. If you look at this schematic, you will see that it's an invert relationship as we get closer to the patient. The college, the Act, has your broadest scope of practice. When we then go to the regulations do more definition and it narrows it down a little bit. When we get to the college, we then have our own position statements and policies that may narrow that a little bit more. And then the employer, of course, will have their own policies as their own practices and their own areas that they do and do not do exams in. So that's going to bring the scope down even more. Then you're going to get to that individual MRT or MIRTP and what their individual scope is, and then down to the patient and what their needs are. Except for the first two, they're legal documents that are very difficult to change, so require a very long, arduous process. Those are pretty stagnant. The rest of them are all fluid. And as you get closer to the patient, they're even more fluid. So for the MIRTP, your sphere of practice, your individual scope, today is different than it was 5 years ago. And it's going to be different in 5 years from now. It's a constantly evolving thing that you need to reflect on and be aware of. And what that means is that you can lose things that were part of your scope, and you can gain things that weren't part of your scope previously. If, for example, an employer comes to you and requests that you do some type of procedure that you have not done in 5, 6 years and you're uncomfortable with it and you don't feel it's part of your scope any longer, it's incumbent upon you to vocalize that. It is not incumbent upon you to refuse. What's incumbent is to work with that manager to have a discussion on how you regain that and do it in a safe way so that the public is protected. But it's really important as MIRTPs that we have a solid understanding of our own scopes. And our own scopes are going to be more narrow than what the full scope of practice is for your profession. Moving on to communication at the college, it's our responsibility as a college to give you accessible, accurate, clear, respectful, timely, and transparent communication. Are we successful at that all the time? No, we're not. We are working on it. Definitely on the clear and the timely part are a struggle at times. We get feedback on something that's confusing. We'd love to hear the feedback because it's only helped us learn and how to do it better. And timely, how much advance notice do you want to something? What's too much time? Because if we put it out too early, then you forget about it. If we put it out too late, then, so we're still working on what is that time and everything. And we will continue to try to improve our communication, but these are our responsibilities at a college to our registrants, to communicate with you effectively. So my next question to you, and this is a free type-in word, who is the college accountable to? Who do you think we are accountable to? So, let's see. Good, yep. We have one, I'm just waiting to see if we get the third one. I see it now. Okay, so moving, our three main accountabilities are the public, the government, and the registrants. Our accountabilities are a little different to each one. The public is that our decision is made in the public's best interest. So every decision the college made should be made from the lens of what is in the best interest of the public. The governments, we're accountable to them. The legislation is owned by the government. We're regulated at their behest. If at any time they feel that they don't think we're doing the job that was intended, they can have an external reviewer brought in. They can place someone else in charge of the organization, or they can just remove the right to self-regulate from us at any given time. And the registrants, we are accountable to you, just in a different way. We're not there to do necessarily everything you guys want, and we're definitely not there to say, do wage negotiations and change work environments and things like that. So we wouldn't be playing an association role or a union role, but we are accountable to you. We need to be clear on what the expectations are. We need to communicate with you effectively, and we need to be an oversight body that supports you in being professionals. So here's another one for you guys. What do you think the accountabilities of the MIRTPs are? So we've talked about what the college's accountabilities are, but what are your accountabilities on an individual level? Any thoughts? Looks like we're getting most of them. So here, and this of course is not an all-inclusive list, but some of the ideas that we came up with was being informed. That is your responsibility. So it is your prerogative to read or not read what comes across in emails at any given time. However, if, say, something happens and some standard changes and the college puts it out there and you choose not to engage in reading that, that doesn't negate your responsibility of knowing it. It's sort of along the same times that if a cop pulls you over for something and you said, well, I didn't know that rule. They're not really concerned that you didn't know the rule. It's still a rule and you're responsible to abide by it. So it is your responsibility to be engaged and informed in your profession. It's your responsibility to reflect on your competence and your practice and ensuring that you maintain that. It's your responsibility to demonstrate professional behavior. And the other one I want to talk a little bit more about is public behavior, because this is sort of a nebulous idea. Public behavior, when you wear a health-regulated hat, as you are held to a higher public standard of behavior. So if there's any time that people are aware that definitely if you put yourself out there as a healthcare professional, or if it's just sort of commonly aware of, you need to be cognizant of that. And I'm talking about more extreme types of behavior, but I can give you one example of an incident that happened in Ontario with a physician who was going to his daughter's Christmas concert. He was just there as a parent. However, some type of altercation happened with him and another parent. He ended up yelling racial slurs at this woman, and people in the audience, well, obviously it was witnessed by a whole slew of people, and there were people who knew he was a physician and they reported him to the college. And he was held accountable because his behavior did not uphold the reputation of the profession. So you just need to be aware of those type of things. Now that's an extreme case. I hope to goodness that none of you are going out and yelling racial slurs at people. Who can lay a complaint? Currently, anyone can lay a complaint with NSMRT. It can be the public, it can be a member, it can be an employer, it can be the NSMRT itself. Of course, with sonographers, as there is no regulatory authority, there's no complaints process, so we don't have to worry about it. After is not going to change. The exact same people can lay the complaints. The only difference is that sonographers are now a part of that. Professional misconduct, I wanted to discuss a little quick. These are some examples, and of course not an all-inclusive list, but just put them up there so that people can have some ideas of the type of things that we would be considered as professional misconduct. Two of them I'm going to bring up. Falsifying records. People think of falsifying records as basically falsifying patient records. You need to think broader than that. It's falsification of records, period. If you falsified a timesheet, you could be held accountable if that was brought to the college. So you just need to be aware if it's any dishonest documentation, you could be held accountable. Another thing I wanted to highlight was this one: publishing or causing to be published any advertisement that is false, deceptive, or misleading. And I bring this to your attention because this is actually high on Department of Health and Wellness's list right now. We had a case with the chiropractic college this year where a chiropractor was posting things about anti-vaccine and other forms of health care that were not evidence-based. That person was asked to pull them down. They refused to pull them down. Ultimately, that chiropractor had to relinquish their license because they were not willing to pull them down, and they were therefore using their healthcare hat and supporting non-evidence-based medicine. So you just need to be aware of that, again, that if you are going to be supporting something, that there's evidence to support it. And if you're out there putting something out to the public that is not evidence-based, that you could, again, be held accountable for that. Duty to report. Currently, there is no duty to report for any of us. We're same at that. So if something were to occur, you actually have no legal obligation to report. But afterwards, all MIRTPs will have a duty to report. And so let's look at what that means to us. Where appropriate, MITCs have a duty to report who? So when we talk about duty to report, who are we reporting? I guess we can stop that because it looks like they've got a good solid handle on that. While any coworker, any coworker that you really had an issue with about that you felt there was dangerous practice involved, we would suggest that you report to manager. But as far as duty to report, you're talking about a report to a regulator. So some of your coworkers may not be regulated, so therefore you would have no regulator to go to. The right answer is any regulated health professional, because it's more than just your MIRTP group. If you saw a physician who was truly dangerous, then there is an expectation that you would inform the College of Physicians. So if you saw someone physically abusing or sexually assaulting someone, it doesn't matter that they're not part of your college. If they're part of a college, you should be reporting them. And when we talk about duty report, we're talking about if there's reasonable grounds to believe. We do not want to hear everything that happens in your workplace. But if you have reasonable grounds to believe that someone is unsafe to practice, that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about unsafe to practice. We're not talking about an error. Someone makes a mistake. That is not we don't want that coming to the college. If someone marks someone's right, so left instead of their right, on an occasion, that doesn't rise to the level of something that you should be reporting to us. And so you think about it, and the preference is to always allow an employer to manage a situation first if it's something that can be managed that way. If it's not something that's an imminent danger to the public, then really the manager should be your first line, and they should be given a chance to work with and fill whatever knowledge gaps or skills gaps are there. It's when it becomes something that you think is really a danger on an ongoing basis to the public, especially with like the incompetence issues. The only time you would really be running directly to the regulator and your manager as well is if it's something that's more imminent, okay? Such as like sexual misconduct and drug or alcohol impairment. When a complaint comes to the college, we really, in a very simplified layout of it, is we have three choices. We can dismiss it, we can resolve it through an informal hearing, or we can go to a full panel hearing. Typically, most will not be dismissed and most will not go to a full panel hearing. The vast majority of complaints that go to colleges are resolved through an informal agreement between the person that the complaint's about and the college. Dismissals will happen if the complaint is not related to regulation, or if, when you look at what the complaint is, even if it was proven true that it doesn't rise to the level of misconduct, then you wouldn't bother proceeding through it. An informal resolution means that you would you wouldn't have a finding of anything, so you wouldn't say they did this or they did that, but you would say there's indications that these findings were true, that this person might have knowledge gaps or skills gaps in these areas, and they would be beneficial for them to be filled by doing da. So you list whatever that is, whether it's education, whether it's supervised practice, it could be a multitude of things, but then that person has to agree to enter into that agreement. So it's a mutual agreement, okay? And then if they don't fulfill the agreement, then you go to a full panel hearing. A full panel hearing is a public process. The findings are posted to the website, and any conditions are posted to your license. So what is the primary function of the complaints process from your perspective? Is it to address knowledge and skills gaps? Is it to limit your practice? Is it to protect the profession? Or is it to punish the MIRTPs? Okay, guys, moving. So it is actually really to address skills gaps. There's very few cases where licenses are actually pulled. And I mean, to pull someone's license and to take away their livelihood, that's a severe consequence. Really what it is we're trying to protect the public, and the way to protect the public is if you identify what the issue is and help fill that issue so that whatever the risk is, that you mitigate or remove. That is really the intent. If in severe cases you can't mitigate or reduce that risk in any other way but to pull a license, that's when you pull a license. But it's not a common occurrence to be pulling licenses. It is not to protect the profession, although the public sometimes feels that's exactly what regulators do, is to protect the profession. It is to, when we start putting things under the rug, that would be considered protecting the profession, but that's not the intent of it. The intent is to protect the public through mitigating the risk. And I just want to make some take-home points from this talk, and that is that the MIRTPs are involved in determining the rules that govern their profession, and that's one of the big pluses to self-regulation. Because in the absence of self-regulation, it doesn't mean you wouldn't be regulated, it just means you would be regulated in another method, and you wouldn't have the input from the MIRTPs and what that governance looks like. The focus is not public interest, so the focus is public interest and not self-interest. And that MIRTPs are accountable for their own behavior with the college, and the college provides assistance and oversight. We did add some links to our webinars for you and some contact information on the slide deck, and now we're going to move to a game, and Jennifer's going to take that over.
All right, thank you, Julie. Okay, so for this game, the room is kind of going to have to be divided, unfortunately. All the outside tables have the snakes and regulators board already on their table. So I'm going to split the room right in the half, and then this half go to these tables, and this half go to those tables. All right, so that everybody can have a chance to play. The instructions pretty similar to regular snakes and ladders. You're going to assign one person at your table to be the person that will submit the answer via the poll. I'll give everybody a second to get settled. And it's just going to be a quick game too, so if you don't want to move all your chairs, that's okay. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so it looks like pretty much everyone's settled. So what we're going to do is everyone at the table is going to assign one person to be the person that will be sending the results via their cell phone. So you guys can decide that amongst each other. You're going to listen to the question. You're going to select your answer as a group, and then you'll have about 20 seconds to discuss the answers. Once your table has decided, again, that person will, that's been nominated or voluntold, will be the one to submit that answer to the polling system. If your answer is incorrect, you may not roll the dice or move. If your answer is correct, you may, and then you move the number of spaces that your dice tells you you can. Obviously, if you hit a ladder, you can move up. If you hit a snake, you move down. And in order to win, you have to actually get off the grid. So I think it goes up to 64. You have to get to 65, okay? Just so that everybody's clear on that as well. And if you win really early, you get all the sixes, then what you can do is you can still keep playing, but maybe just raise your hand so we know somebody has won, but we'll still keep going through the questions, okay? The game's only going to be about 15 minutes or so.
And we have some swag for a couple
We do have some prizes as well, so try hard to win. All right. Everybody's going to get very competitive. I love it. All right, so ready for the first question? All set? Perfect. Okay. So First question, what will be the name of the new college? Does everybody want me to read that or can they read it? Because that's going to be, they're going to get tired of hearing my voice. Read it? Okay. A, Nova Scotia College of Medical Imaging and Radiation Therapy Professionals. B, Nova Scotia College of Medical Imaging Technologists and Radiation Therapists. C, Nova Scotia College of Medical Radiation Technologists and Diagnostic Medical Sonographers. Or D, Nova Scotia College of Radiation Professionals and Diagnostic Medical Sonographers. Yeah, I stopped it. Oh, sorry, go little. Yeah, show responsibility. All right, so everybody got it right, I think. Do we have 11 tables there? Yeah? I think one didn't. Okay, one table didn't answer. Oh, sorry guys. All right, so everybody roll your dice and move ahead if you did it correctly. All right, everybody ready for question number 2? All right, how many continuing professional development CPD credits will be required? 20, 30, 40, or 50? All right, okay, let's show that one. Oh my goodness, so smart. All right, everybody got it right, so roll your dice.
They do get harder.
Yeah, they'll get a little harder. We're just getting you used to it. Okay, next question. Which of the following is not a transitioning option for sonographers? A, pass the Sonography Canada National Entry to Practice exam. B, ARDMS credentials and 1 year sonography work experience in Nova Scotia. C, 5 years work experience in Nova Scotia practicing sonography and no credentials. Or D, nurse performing limited role at IWK. Again, it's not a transitioning option for sonographers. Yep, all right. So, perfect. Yeah, nurse performing limited role at the IWK. Remember earlier I was saying that the nurses that would be doing the limited exams, they will still be regulated by their college, not by us. So they will not be transitioning into the college. All right, okay. Next question. You are not required to have which of the following for initial registration with the college? A, personal liability insurance. B, work experience. C, vulnerable persons and criminal records check. Or D, an accurate and truthful disclosure. Yeah, they're getting trickier. I think we'll see which tables are taking notes. Yeah, all right. B, perfect. For 10 of you guys, go ahead. Okay, next question. Primary mandate of the college. Dig deep. All right, A, bring respect to the professions. B, educate MIRTPs. C, improve Nova Scotia's healthcare. Or D, protect the public. Oh, quiet. Nobody really needs to argue on that one. Okay, is everybody ready for the answer then already? Okay, perfect. So yes, it's protect the public. Obviously, through that we hope we're improving Nova Scotia's healthcare also, but that would just be a byproduct of it. All right. Next question. Why is self-regulation important? Protection of titles, so MRT and DMS, nobody can use those titles. B, clearly defined scope of practice. C, public protection. D, accountability of the profession. Or E, all of the above. All right, there we go. Oh my goodness, awesome. All right, you guys are pros. You should have been giving the presentation. Okay, next question. I think somebody hit a snake over here. Okay, which of the following statements is false as it relates to applicant requirements for registration with the college? A, have passed the national credentialing exams. B, have proof of personal liability insurance. C, is fluent in French or English. Or D, must have graduated from an accredited program. So which is false? You need all the other things. All right, so everybody have their answers in? Ready? Okay. All right, so two people, or two tables. I see you guys, I see you. All right, so it does have to be, you have to be fluent in English. That's the only language requirement in Nova Scotia. We would have accepted A because we just noticed that we didn't write full registration, so you can technically have the temporary license, right? So yeah, we would have accepted A. All right. Okay. So the college will A, ensure access to CPD opportunities. B, provide personal liability insurance. C, negotiate MIRTP wages. Or D, set minimum practice requirements. Ten more seconds. Okay, we're at 20. Yes. Awesome, good job. All you guys get to roll. So just to kind of reiterate, obviously you guys know what you're talking about here, but the college is, oh no, another snake. So the college will try to provide some CPD opportunities, but we're not going to ensure that you get all the CPD opportunities. There is the accountability on the MIRTP to look for different ways, which include volunteering, things like that as well, right? Yeah. Providing personal liability insurance, that's through external, whether it's your association or a third party. Negotiating your wages is the job of your union. Okay, CPD audits will be conducted every 2 years. How is the audit pool selected? This is a tough one. A, audit committee selects 10% of the registrants at random. B, registrants are assigned to one of 7 rotating audit pools. C, registration platform selects those non-compliant with CPD and up to 10% of registrants on random basis. Or D, audits are conducted on registrants every 6th year based on initial year of registration.
Some of them, this is a guess because we didn't give them the information. We're trying to see if they can read.
Yeah, to be fair, we didn't give you this information. We just want to see what you guys think. All right, so what's the answer?
Enter, go showing.
All right.
And it is
so
C.
All right. So registration platform selects those non-compliant with CPD, so make sure you get your CPDs uploaded, and up to 10% of registrants on a random basis. So, all right. Okay. So, you smell alcohol on the breath of a physician that you are working with. What action should you take? A, immediately report them to your manager. B, tell patient you suspect doctor has been drinking. C, report them to your manager before leaving for the day. Or D, report to manager immediately and to the College of Physicians as soon as possible. Five seconds left. And time's up. So answer,
Yes.
yeah, D. So report to manager immediately and to College of Physicians as soon as possible.
I'm just going to add, the problem with selection A is the fact that if a physician is showing up with alcohol in their breath, it is a high likelihood that that person has a substance abuse problem if they're actually showing up inebriated at work. So at that point, there is imminent danger, and reporting to the manager is insufficient. It really does need, under your duty to report, that would be something that would rise to the level you really need to reach out to the college.
All right, we're cruising. How long is a CPD cycle? So how many years is in it? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years? Okay, and there's only 2 more questions after this, okay? And then we'll take questions. All right, 5 seconds. And time's up. Perfect. Woo! All right. What? Oh! Yeah, so you can keep going, but that's awesome. I think we had 2 tables. I think table 6 as well, maybe?
Did 6 win?
What was that? Oh, you got a ladder. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we'll keep going. 2 more questions. What will annual regulatory fees be? $450, $675, $731.25, or variable? Ten seconds left. All right, and time. Awesome. Everybody can roll. 450, so exactly what MRTs have been paying. And, okay, if you are new to practice in Nova Scotia and do not meet the currency hours, you must have completed which of the following? A, an accredited Canadian MIRTP program in the last 5 years. B, completed 240 hours of supervised practice. C, successfully met assessment requirements for international applicants. Or D, A or C. 10 seconds left. And that's time.
Okay, so
All right.
find that they won. Okay.
Just to show the answer.
Oh, sure, yes.
Yeah. Perfect. A or C. Awesome. Oh wait, we do have one more question.
Oh, we have lots more.
Oh, we have one. Oh, we're out of time. Okay, yes, so we're out of time and we have a winner. Okay. Table number 1.
Where? Anybody else close?
Is anybody else close? Oh, you guys won. Oh.
Anybody else close? We've got 2 tables. Are any other close? 2, 1. Any other ones that's close? Pardon me? No? Okay.
Yes.
You can start asking.
Perfect.
Actually, do those 2 tables want to come up to us and I'll pass you your swag?
Yeah,
The 2 winning tables.
The winning tables, come on up and get your stuff.
So what we have. Sorry?
Oh, yeah.
So what we have for swag is our first thing that's branded with the new college. It's a keychain. Inside the keychain is a silicone reusable straw.
Woo!
I'm a winner.
Yeah.
Yes. 6.
Awesome. All right, so now we are going to be opening the floor up to questions from the tables. So if you have a question, you can just raise your hand, and we'll go from there.
Christy? Sorry, guys. boy. Guys, questions, so we could just quiet down so we could hear them? Thank you. Oh, yes. So Christy's asking us to clarify what we mean when we say dual discipline. Dual discipline, we will be, at the college, 5 separate licenses that we will give. They will be radiological technology, magnetic resonance, nuclear medicine, radiation therapy, and diagnostic medical sonography. Those are your licenses and those are your disciplines. You can have sub-areas of practice. So an X-ray tech who does CT, that's a sub-area or specialty of practice. It's not a separate discipline. So there's only 5. When we talk about discipline, there's only 5. Okay? Yes?
I have a question. When you talked about, because the college's purpose is mainly protection of the public
Yes,
safety,
yeah.
which is what I understand. The makeup of those that are on this body,
Yes.
does it include members of the public, or does it include other professionals other than ourselves?
That's an excellent question. As a public board, the new college will have 6 MIRTPs and 3 or 4 public members, and the public members are appointed by the government. And actually, our new college is now on the actual website for that. So, you know.
Is it a volunteer basis for those that are members of the public, or
Yes.
is there a requirement to pay them? Or?
No, each board has their own things, and so when we posted ours, it just says remuneration of any expenses associated with service, but they don't get anything else at this point. That can change if the board chooses to make a decision different than that, but currently that's the policy. Can you stand?
So in regards to CPD credits,
Yes.
if someone is off on a maternity leave or off for a lengthy illness that may span a year, will they be prorated for how many CPDs they have to get in that?
And if the CPD is prorated to the number of months that you're a registrant. If you're an active registrant, you need to get CPD for that length of time. So if when you're off on that leave, you're not, or a parental leave or sick leave, you're have resigned in good standing, then that period of time would not factor into your CPD requirements. It will still factor in for currency. Currency hours are not prorated.
You have to say someone was off and they're off for a lengthy illness, you're saying you have to resign?
You do resign in good standing and then you just reinstate.
Okay.
But there's, I mean, if you've met, there's a caveat for sonographers on that reinstatement. So if you're coming in under the grandfathering in clause, a sonographer who doesn't have sonography candidate credentials, so if you're one of those people with no credentials but have been working for 5 years in sonography, you would want to definitely double check before you ever relinquish your registration or your licensure, because coming back in may be problematic, because after that grandfathering in period, you need to meet the long-term ongoing requirements for registration. So if you're coming in under some type of clause like that, that would be the one caveat for that group. And yes?
Just a couple of people were wondering, if you don't have to be able to answer this, because it might depend on an employer or province, but if you gave up your CAMRT or Sonography Canada, and you were only a member of the college, and you went to a province that was not regulated,
Yes.
What's happening with other people that are regulated now? Are they being recognized based on their college?
Typically that was what, sonography is a little different in this comment because it's all new, right? What I will tell you from the MRT world, there are still provinces that are not regulated. So if you have an MRT moved to BC, per se, that isn't regulated, the employer recognizes whether or better yet, I'll use Ontario as an example because Ontario's MRT regulated and they don't have to belong to CMRT. So a good number of their registrants don't belong to CMRT. If they moved to another province, you'd look to look the regulatory statuses and there's not an issue. So CMRT would easily accept them again if the employer wanted them as well. So
you could get back.
Yeah. Yes. Once you've written that national exam, you have passed it, you can't rewrite the national exam. It's like you've already got that credential. They can say that you're not a member, but they can't say that you didn't write that exam and pass it. Well, we won't, as from the regulator stance, no, we would never ask you to do that. Okay, so if you were out of date and you needed a refresher, that's still not what you would do. You would still have to do some other type. So our refresher program that we have for like Nuke Med and that, there is an exam, but it's not the national exam involved. So from a regulator stance, once you pass that national exam, you're never going to be asked to rewrite that national exam. Yes. Jennifer can talk more to it.
So for Snarfy Canada as well, obviously all of those are different entities, they're different associations, they choose how they do it. Snarfy Canada, I believe you have like a 5-year grace period after you, I can look this up too and give you the specific numbers, but I think it's 5 years after you give up your membership that you can reinstate, but you have to in that time still fulfill your CPDs for them and things like that. So I think you guys are more so concerned with if you're going to an unregulated area, right? Does that more so depend on employer too?
Yeah, and of course, when you go unregulated, it's totally up to the employer what they do or don't do. And obviously, it's an employer decision, but what I'm going to say is if you're coming from a regulated province to an unregulated province, I'd be really highly surprised that employer would not recognize your regulatory status and that you would be within Canada, right? We're talking the Canadian context. So it would be really surprising to me an employer would say, no, we don't consider that enough for you to practice, okay?
And you'll always have the proof that you wrote the exam and passed it as well.
And the other thing is we need to remember with Sonography Canada, this is really new world for them because up until this last year, they've had nobody that was a regulated. So they are that pseudo-regulator. And just like CMRT years ago when MRT started to become regulated, there will be an evolution of that body and its role, but it takes time and there'll be more clearly defined guidelines and understanding of what happens, but in this short term, there definitely will be some confusing messages sent out to sonographers. That's absolute, unfortunately. Someone was at the back first, and then I'll go to the front. Okay.
So just in general, a lot of us are finding that an application fee to join something for $100 is quite steep for something that we have to do anyway, and we're just wondering why we have to spend $100.
It costs time and effort to review every one of those applications. The fees are based off of what it costs to run the organization. It's not really factoring in those additional things were above and beyond. So application fees actually are fairly standard at $100. I think we're on the low end if you actually go to other regulators and look. We're on the low end of what the fees are. If you look at additional fees, we only have that application fee and a reinstatement fee for those people who allow their registration to lapse, who don't resign in good standing. So if you resign in good standing, currently there is no even reinstatement fee. So they're the only two additional fees, and it goes to all the work that has to go into reviewing applications and the time within the department to manage that. So someone up here?
Can you just clear up those like 400 hours that you need?
Okay.
Because I'm just thinking like we have a lot of casual people
Mm-hmm.
who work, and when I divided the 400, that's 53 days of work. So if you're casual and only coming in for vacations, that might be hard to get.
That's over 5 years though.
Oh, over 5
Years. Yes, sorry, that's over 5 years. Yeah, no, that would be, yeah. Yes, 800 over 5. It works out to, yeah. What it works out to is 1 day every 2 weeks, on average.
Over 5 years.
Over 5 years, so.
That's still quite a bit for some casual people.
Well, typically with casuals, they'll go periods where they're not working at all, and then periods where they're working quite a bit. So it's what it averages out to. It's not,
And that's not the case where we work, because we have 4 casual girls,
Yes.
and they only work when someone's sick or on vacation. We
Mhm.
work in a small hospital, so they're constantly being rotated. So 53 days is actually a lot, and some of them are doing locums
Yeah.
to help. So with those hours count?
yes,
Oh,
Oh,
it doesn't
yes.
have to be in the province,
no.
just that you're
Yes.
working in sonography.
And they don't have to all be directly clinical hours, like they could be other things. So that's one of the things that people were talking about is, you know, you can get involved in research. You could go, for example, School of Health Science hires lab demonstrators. Those would be hours that you could use towards currency hours. So those type of things as well.
Thank you for clearing that.
Not a problem. What I would say is remember there was that caveat in there too. So for people who can't meet currency hour requirements, they can apply for a different form of assessment it won't be a little hoop to walk through, but there are other options as well. Anybody else?
Do you just want to reiterate the 800, 1200, 1600, how that works?
Yes, so again, if you are one discipline, if you're licensed in one discipline, you need 400 hours that are direct to that discipline and an additional 400 hours that relate to that discipline. So if you have more than one discipline, you need 400 hours directly related to each of those disciplines. So if you're in 2 disciplines, you need 400 that you can directly relate to sonography and 400 that you can directly relate to x-ray. And then you have an additional 400 that are general hours that can be divided across any way you want. The thought process there was that there's a recognition while we want you to maintain skill sets in each of your discipline, there's also overlap around things like communication skills and patient care skills, so that it gives the latitude for the individual to have some flexibility in how they get those hours. The other thing is, as this goes forward, it's a policy. So when we look at policy, remember on that level of that hierarchy tree, policies can change. So if down the road we find that there's operational, really some struggles with it, it can go back for reconsideration as well. So over time, we'll get a better sense of how it's working, not working, and what issues are coming up, and then we can have those conversations to retune it some more if need be. Yes?
Sorry about that. When it comes to CPD credits, how are they broken down? Like, I know there's some of the CMRT, the full-time CPD courses, like the MRI.
Yeah.
Like, how is it broken down? Because I know if you do a full-time course through CMRT, I can't imagine that's going to count towards your full 30 credits.
No, it will not. So this is when I had said that while it's usually about 1 hour to 1 hour, but that's not quite true. They're an excellent case of where it's not true. So if you take a full credit course, the number of hours, you're not going to get the 30 credits from that one course. If you go online, there is an entire program for CPD on the website. And the links there, and in the PowerPoint, the links there as well, which we'll post to the website. And that will go through how it's broken down. You do not need to get items from each of the categories. However, some of the categories do have caps. So for example, you cannot get all your CPD from journal reading. It is in there, but at some point you will cap out and you won't be able to get any more points from that. Anything else? Okay, we'll let you get to break then. Sorry, we'll let you get to a quick coffee break before the next session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Great.
How do you think that went?
I think it went great. Maybe should I draw them? We'll just sit and make it.
Yeah, just hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. My name is Lubna.
Can we draw them out there?
Okay.
Is there a mic that?
I have to renew my membership.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. The one thing is I really want to meet one of you guys one-on-one.
I can make the announcement now saying to come back.
And just help us second something.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that. Sorry for interrupting, guys. We're going to be drawing for the 50/50 door prizes in a little bit. So if you guys wanted to bring your break food and your coffee and stuff back in here, and then we'll draw the little prize after before you go to the regular session.
Yes, and I really want, it was you that I said, right? Yeah, but I really want to sit down and talk to you guys about what I need your help. You were the one I spoke to. And Jack might have been, if we had 2 sessions. I think there were 2 of them. Oh, hi Jennifer, how are you? Yeah. I would love to meet you guys. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I am. Look now. Look now. I would love to meet you guys because there's so many things I can do. I used to work as a music professional as well, and I graduated in 1999 in February. So, yeah, look, that's around 72 as well.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Okay, yes. And what I'm going to do is I will definitely love to meet you in person. And I'm actually in right at Redford, so I can just walk in whenever you have time. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I forgot to stop the recording.